It was a gloomy, rainy late autumn day when I moved into the third-floor rental unit, tucked away in the old downtown district. My landlady was a white-haired, elderly woman with murky, fogged eyes who spoke at a slow, dragging pace. When she handed over the keys, her fingers felt ice-cold, as if she'd just pulled them straight out of freezing water. She warned me repeatedly that I could touch and rearrange anything in the apartment, everything except the vintage wall clock hanging in the living room. Under no circumstances was I to touch it, wind its gears, or attempt to take it off the wall entirely. "That clock, it's cursed," she muttered, her voice dropping to a hushed murmur, tangled with the patter of rain beating against the windows outside. "Leave it be, and no harm comes. Disturb it, and disaster follows." A chill crawled up my spine as I listened. My name is Ethan Reed. I'd only recently graduated college and was scraping by on barely any savings. This apartment's rent was absurdly cheap, and the neighborhood wasn't far from the city center. Its only flaw was its extreme age. Peeling, yellowed plaster covered the walls. Every step across the wooden floorboards sent out shrill creaks. The old wooden window frames didn't seal shut properly, and gusts of wind whistled through the gaps, sounding like someone quietly sobbing right beside my ear. The wall clock hanging in the living room stuck out like a sore thumb amid the worn decor. It was crafted from solid black-stained timber, a design long out of fashion, fitted with frosted glass over its face. The numbers and metal hands had rusted into a dark, dried blood crimson shade. Its pendulum hung frozen dead center, coated in a thick layer of dust that spoke to decades of disuse. I leaned in for a closer look. No brand markings marred its wooden frame, only twisted, winding carvings snaking along every edge. Strange, unrecognizable symbols that twisted tighter the longer I stared, stoking a quiet panic deep in my chest. At the time, I brushed the landlady's warnings off as senile old superstition. Count myself lucky to find such affordable housing in a sprawling metropolis, I thought. I wrote off the bizarre rule as nothing more than the landlady's odd quirk and nodded along to appease her. My first night in the apartment was restless. The ancient building offered zero sound insulation. Wind howled outside, cars rumbled past the street below every few minutes, and faint, unexplained creaks echoed through the walls non-stop, chasing away all my sleep. Sometime past 1 a.m., I just drifted halfway into slumber when a tiny, sharp click cut through the silence. It was crisp, the sound of clock gears shifting, crystal clear in the dead quiet of midnight. My heart lurched, and my eyes flew open. I held my breath, straining to listen, but the room fell utterly silent again, save for the wind's mournful wailing outside. I told myself the noise was just the old wooden furniture expanding and contracting with temperature shifts, that I was merely overwrought and jumpy. But over the next several days, odd occurrences piled up one after another. Every single dawn, that same faint click echoed precisely as I teetered on the edge of sleep, once, or sometimes a rapid string of clicks, yanking me awake without fail. I'd summon my courage and trudge into the living room to investigate, yet the clock remained frozen solid. Its pendulum never stirred, its hands locked rigidly at 3:10, unmoving no matter how many times I checked. Then my belongings began shifting place on their own. I'd set my keys neatly on the entryway cabinet before bed, only to find them scattered across the living room floor at sunrise. I left my water mug on my nightstand each night, yet woke to discover it dragged to the far corner of my desk, its rim turned inward toward the wall as if deliberately positioned. Even my discarded laundry, carelessly tossed over a dining chair, would be folded perfectly neat and stacked on the sofa by morning. Dread coiled tight in my gut, and the landlady's parting words echoed relentlessly in my mind. I tried draping a thick cloth over the clock to block it from sight, yet each dawn the fabric vanished without a trace. The black clock hung bare on the wall once more, its twisted carvings seeming to writhe to life in dim lamplight, boring an unblinking gaze straight into me. Insomnia gripped me hard, leaving me foggy and disoriented. I made endless careless mistakes at work, and my coworkers asked if I'd fallen ill. I couldn't bring myself to recount the paranormal horrors haunting my nights, so I simply lied and said I hadn't gotten enough rest. The night that true terror sank its claws into me fell on my 7th day in the apartment. I'd pulled overtime until nearly midnight, returning home past 11. I twisted the front door open to total blackness, reaching for the light switch only to flick it uselessly time and again. The power was out. I fished my phone out of my pocket and flicked on its flashlight, its weak glow barely illuminating the cramped living room. Cold wind slipped through the cracked window, rippling the curtains, and a bone-deep chill seeped into every corner of the space. I turned to check the electrical breaker box, when the flashlight beam swept inadvertently across the wall clock. I froze on the spot, every drop of blood in my veins turning to ice. The clock that had stayed frozen for days was ticking. The second hand crept forward slowly, heavy and deliberate, beating a steady tick-tock that reverberated through the pitch-black room as if hammering against my heart. Its pendulum swayed back and forth in small, eerie arcs, each swing releasing a dull thud that seemed to count down the seconds until death. Trembling violently, my phone slipped from my grasp and clattered onto the floor, the flashlight cutting out entirely. Complete darkness swallowed the room, yet the clock's ticking only grew louder, faster, more unrelenting. "Who's there?" I stammered, my voice cracking with tears, but no answer came. In the black void, I felt a frigid, viscous stare fixated on me, emanating straight from the clock's shadow, piercing through the dark to lock onto my body. The gaze reeked of cold malice, sending goosebumps racing over every inch of my skin. I dared not even breathe too loud. I wanted to run, but my legs felt weighted with lead, rooted to the floor. I tried to scream, yet my throat clamped shut, no sound able to escape my lips. Abruptly, the clock's gears halted. The pendulum hung suspended mid-swing, and the ticking cut off without warning. The silence that followed was far more terrifying than the noise had ever been. Then soft footsteps shuffled across the living room's far corner, creeping slowly toward me. Light footsteps, heavy wood creaks sounding with every step, drawing nearer and nearer. A wave of freezing cold washed over me, thick with the rotten stench of aged timber and dust, underscored by a faint, metallic tang of blood. I strained to pry my eyes open, desperate to see whatever approached, yet my eyelids weighed 1,000 pounds, impossible to lift. My consciousness blurred, my body stiffening rigid, and a cold, weightless hand brushed lightly across my cheek, devoid of all warmth, a sensation that sent unending shudders racing down my spine. I jolted awake hours later, sprawled flat on the living room floor, sunlight streaming through the windows to warm the space. For a fleeting moment, I convinced myself the night's horrors had been nothing but a nightmare. But the lingering cold clinging to my skin and the chill of the floor seeping through my clothes confirmed every terrifying detail had been real. I scrambled upright and glanced instantly at the wall clock. It sat frozen again at 3:10, pendulum motionless, as if its brief movement had never occurred at all. I couldn't bear another night here. I called the landlady at once, begging to terminate my lease, even if it meant forfeiting my security deposit. She fell silent for a long stretch after hearing my plea, then sighed heavily and spoke slowly. "I knew this would happen sooner or later. Before you moved in, a woman lived here, a clockmaker in her mid-30s. She never married, spent every waking hour tending that wall clock. One dawn, at 3:10, she hanged herself, her eyes locked fixed on that clock until the very end." I gripped my phone so tight my knuckles whitened, cold dread flooding my entire body. After she died, the clock stopped ticking forever. But every midnight, strange noises stir inside this unit. Multiple tenants rented it before you, none lasted more than a handful of nights. All of them swore they saw a woman in gray standing beneath the clock, staring up at it without moving an inch. Sorrow and quiet fear laced her tone. "I told you not to touch it to avoid disturbing her spirit. She's only clinging to the clock she loved. She means no harm to living people, but no ordinary soul can endure her presence." Everything clicked into place. The shifting objects, the icy stairs, the endless midnight disturbances, all belonged to the dead clockmaker, trapped within these four walls, chained to her beloved timepiece for year after endless year. I didn't linger a single extra minute. I threw my belongings together in a frantic rush and fled the old apartment building. Only when sunlight hit my shoulders outside did I feel truly alive again, my shirt soaked all the way through with cold sweat. The landlady returned my full security deposit upon checkout, pressing a mug of hot water into my hands and warning me to vet future rentals far more carefully and steer clear of ancient buildings. My hands shook too badly to utter a single word as I took the cup. I thought escaping the apartment would put an end to all the paranormal torment, yet I couldn't have been more wrong. This was merely the beginning. My first night in the new rental, far newer and well insulated, I crashed into bed early, exhausted from weeks of sleepless nights, and slipped rapidly into deep slumber. At 3 a.m., I was ripped violently awake without warning, as if an invisible hand had dragged me straight out of my dreams. The new apartment was silent, no wind, no creaks, no distant traffic noise, but a familiar, dreadful tick-tock echoed crystal clear beside my ears. The sound of that cursed black wall clock. I stiffened all over and twisted my head to stare at the blank bedroom wall. Nothing hung there, empty plaster stretching unbroken across the surface. Yet the ticking grew louder, ringing directly beside my skull, as if the black clock hung right above my bed, its pendulum swaying and hands turning slow. I could feel that same icy stare pinning me down again, identical to the sensation I'd endured in the old downtown unit. I burrowed deep under my blankets, trembling, too terrified to speak or open my eyes, waiting until the first faint glow of dawn to watch the gaze and ticking fade away. The nightmare repeated every night without exception. I woke sharp at 3 each dawn, the clock's ticking echoing, the cold unblinking stare never straying far. I visited a doctor, who diagnosed severe stress-induced auditory and visual hallucinations and prescribed sleep medication. Yet even with the pills, I jolted awake at the exact same hour, the phantom sounds and sensations undiminished. I relocated 3 separate times, switching apartments across different neighborhoods, yet no matter where I fled, 3 a.m. brought the unmissable ticking and icy stare without fail. My appearance wasted away, pale skin, bloodshot eyes, my mind teetering on the edge of complete breakdown. I dreaded bedtime, terrified of the hour creeping closer, yet no matter how hard I fought sleep, I would wake at 3 without fail. One night, I couldn't fight the exhaustion any longer. I sat upright on my bed, staring into the black ceiling, hot tears streaming down my cheeks. I spoke to the empty air, my voice trembling uncontrollably. "What do you want from me? I left that apartment behind. I never touched your clock. Why won't you leave me alone?" The instant the words left my mouth, the ticking cut off entirely. A faint, raspy feminine whisper brushed my ear, as if carried from miles away yet pressed directly against my temple. "My clock, it stopped. Wind it for me." Every hair on my body stood straight on end, my scalp burning with terror, and I clamped a hand over my mouth to muffle a scream. I finally understood her motive. Her attachment to the clock bound her spirit to it after death. Only winding the clock to set its gears in motion again could release her from her earthly tether. And I was the only living person who'd witnessed the clock ticking and heard her ghostly voice. Fear gnawed at my mind, and I had no desire to step foot back in that haunted apartment again, to relive every horrifying memory. But the nightly torture had grown unbearable, slowly draining every ounce of my sanity. I knew I could not run forever. A week later, I returned to the rundown old building and stood outside the cursed third-floor unit. The landlady's face twisted with shock when she saw me, but I offered no lengthy explanation, only asked to borrow the keys once more. I unlocked the door, and the same stale, cold, dust-choked air washed over me. The black wall clock hung on the living room wall, hands still locked at 3, unervingly silent. I drew a deep, shaky breath and stepped forward toward the clock, my heart hammering faster with every step, legs shaking non-stop. I stood beneath the timepiece and lifted my gaze. Its twisted carved pattern seemed to swirl and shift in the dim indoor light, the rusted crimson hands fixed upon me like watchful eyes. My shaking fingers reached out and pried open the tiny wooden door beneath the clock's face, revealing a rust-caked winding knob inside. I wrapped my palm around it and twisted hard. Click, click. Grinding gear sounds echoed as rust flaked off in showers. The pendulum began to rock back and forth, the steady tick-tock resurfacing, growing smooth and consistent by the second. The clock's hands lurched forward at last, creeping past 3 and moving onward. The second the clock's gears settled into steady motion, the frigid, suffocating stare that had haunted me for weeks vanished completely. The ticking beside my ears softened, stripped of its menacing, oppressive weight. The icy chill saturating the apartment dissipated, sunlight slanting through the windows to spill over the clock's black wood, restoring a quiet normalcy to the space. I exhaled a long breath, every muscle in my body going limp as I sank to the floor, drained of all strength. Just as I thought the ordeal was fully over, I glanced down at the wooden floor and spotted a faint shadow stretched across the planks. A woman's silhouette, long hair falling loose, draped in gray fabric, standing directly behind me. Her head bowed slightly, and she dipped forward in a slow, gentle bow. I spun around instantly, yet nothing stood behind me. When I looked back at the floor, the shadow had faded away without a trace. I knew she was gone at last, her obsession lifted, freed from the apartment that had trapped her spirit for decades. I pushed myself to my feet, closed the clock's small wooden door softly, set the keys down on the entryway cabinet, and walked out of the unit. This time, I left calm and unafraid. From that night onward, I never woke at 3 a.m. again. No phantom ticking haunted my ears, no icy invisible gaze lingered over me. I later heard the landlady sold the old apartment at a steep discount, and the new owner tore out all the antique furniture, including the black wall clock. Locals who witnessed the demolition shared two strange tales. Some claimed the clock, which had run perfectly after my visit, seized up mid-disassembly, freezing exactly at 3 p.m., the identical time the clockmaker had taken her own life years prior. Others said workers found a yellowed photograph tucked hidden inside the clock's hollow frame, a young woman in gray holding the black wall clock to her chest, a soft, clear smile in her eyes. I never returned to that old downtown district, nor asked after the apartment building's fate. Still, on quiet late nights, I sometimes catch a faint, fleeting echo of distant ticking that fades as quickly as it arrives. I recognize it as the echo of a spirit's released fixation, the quiet end to a grim, tragic story. I will never forget that rainy autumn day when I first stepped into that worn apartment and laid eyes on the black wall clock, that initial cold prickle of dread settling deep in my bones. Some encounters etch themselves permanently into memory, unerasable no matter how many years slip by. That clock, frozen and reawakened, stopped and restarted, and the lonely woman trapped within its time, left a haunting, sorrowful mark on this world that can never be fully erased.